The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Jussie Smollett. What is you doing, my man? What were you thinking? I know we talked about it the other day, but so he's been arrested, charged with a felony because of lying to the police or filing a false police report. And as of the time of this recording, he is getting prepared to be released on a $100,000 bond and has to surrender his passport. And they have video surveillance showing the men buying the two Nigerian brothers that Jussie apparently hired to attack him. You could see them in the store that night purchasing a red hat to carry out the attack. There's documentation coming out saying, with the plans, basically showing that he intended to use gasoline at first, but then they switched to bleach. Just different details showing. I even think he paid the guys in a check. like how dumb do you have to be? It's almost like, and I haven't even seen. I'm drawing a lot of conjecture here because I haven't seen any episode of Empire. But from what all the memes I see is like Jussie can't get any respect on Empire either. And so now he's brought fiction into reality, or maybe that's just always, maybe that's why they picked him. They cast him for that role in the first place because he was this kind of guy. I don't know. But I do know that it is, while I'm laughing at it because of how ridiculous it is, I do know that, the President of the United States, let me read his tweet because this is exactly what they're going to do with this kind of thing. Donald Trump tweeted to Jussie Smollett saying, "What about MAGA and the tens of millions of people you insulted with your racist and dangerous comments?" And 120,000 likes, 33,000 retweets. This is exactly what they were waiting on. Jussie, you literally handed them what they needed to run up the scoreboard against social justice, against LGBTQ rights, against Black Lives Matter. Literally just handed them this gift. And for what? Some people are thinking, are drawing the conjecture that he was doing this to advance his career, that he was upset about his salary on the show. Like this, it doesn't make sense because it's so stupid. But I've come to learn that human beings are pretty dumb. At times we can be extremely stupid and irrational. So while it makes no sense to me, it does make sense that we can be this ignorant and really think that you could get away with something this ridiculous. That's the only thing that makes sense about this, is that people are really this stupid. And I'm not just name calling and throwing around insults, but this has to be the most ill-conceived, bootleg, half-ass thought through, seriously, he paid the guys in a check. And to think that, and maybe he was counting on the inefficiency of the Chicago Police Department. Oh, but they got real efficient really fast when it was time to crack this case. So, no love for the for the Chicago Police Department, CPD. They're making this. This is all that CNN is talking about. This is all that some major outlets are talking about. And this is exactly the type of fodder that real racists and real homophobic people who are not just racist and homophobic in their personal lives, but people who want to institute national policies, federal law that is to the detriment of the LGBTQ community and to the detriment of the black community, black and brown communities. This is exactly what they wanted and what they needed. And congratulations, Jussie. You gave it to them. Everybody's scrambling to try to figure out how do they position themselves now because they came out in favor of Jussie? Listen, there's really no need to feel bad about supporting him because we live in a country where this thing does happen. How many videos have we seen of racist people in MAGA hats attacking black people? Hell, they did it right at a presidential rally in front of cameras. So there's really no need to apologize for believing Jussie because the story was so believable exactly because MAGA does stand for extremely racist and homophobic beliefs. But instead of people like kind of just accepting that, a lot of people are like scrambling, like, who do we blame? And I blame Jussie. That's the only person to blame here. I blame him. And the reality of it is that America is such a nation that, hell, this type of thing not only could happen, it's not only plausible, but it has happened and it happens now. I'm not talking about something racist attack that happened in the 60s. No, I'm talking about racist attack that happened yesterday. So there's no need to like scramble and try to, finagle your way out of the fact that you believed him and you supported him. No need, because this is America. This is still America. And I think that's why he probably thought he could get away with this. But dummy, I'm sorry, I don't have any other way to describe this. I have no other way of describing this. Yes, America is this racist, but you being a quote unquote star, it will garner so much attention that they are going to efficiently get to the bottom of it. He didn't count on that. He didn't count on CPD putting down everything else and putting all their resources into solving this low-hanging fruit. Anyway. What do you do with this mess? Well, you stop talking about it. Bernie Sanders, ladies and gentlemen, raised $5.9 million in about a 24-hour period. That is unheard of and unbelievable. He is clearly the Democratic frontrunner. And we said this the other day. I said simply because him jumping into the race, period. Like regardless of what he was going to raise, which was unbelievable, he broke records. Besides that, his infrastructure alone, his mailing list, there's just so many things tied up into a person who had a campaign in 2016, 4 years later, still having he didn't stop. He didn't stop the work. Our Revolution and all the different organizations that he was a part of, that he started or he participated in, he did not stop his work. People followed him relentlessly. Like he still was having, not campaign, but rallies, still having rallies and crowds, people gathering to hear what he had to say. So all he ever had to do to become the front runner was to throw his hat in the ring. It doesn't hurt that he got $5.9 million in short order. This is what it's about, man. These small donors, like there's power in small donations, and there's power in there's power. This is probably the most cliche thing I'm going to say in a long time, but man, there's power in the people. I want to say power to the people, but there's power amongst the people. And there is enough power amongst the people to actually push back against. See, you think of it this way. A lot of people don't, or sometimes people, you and I, we kind of discount the power of the people in comparison to the power of corporations and big money. But if you think about it in context, there's very few corporations out there that are actually billion-dollar industries and now $2 trillion industries in Amazon and Apple. There are very few organizations that exist that don't exist off of small donations from the people, small purchases, whether it be a $25, whatever off of Amazon, or whether it be a $500 phone. All of these corporations are dependent on collecting pennies from millions of people. And the more you have to offer, of course, the bigger they come. You know what I mean? Think about Comcast. Everybody has Comcast, right? It's taking a few $100s from everybody, depending on your package, obviously. Maybe you're spending $150 a month. But what I'm trying to say is that the same power that drives corporations, at the end of the day, it's the people. So it only makes sense that a campaign can be driven by the people without the need of corporate money. Because the way the corporations get their wealth is by taking the money of individuals and the people. Of course, there's plenty of businesses that take money from businesses, but they take money from businesses who ultimately get their money from the people. So at the end of the day, all of this is driven by the people. So there's so much power in the people. And we see that in just the first few days of Bernie Sanders' campaign. And we've got a long way to go. But if you think about it, I mean, you're talking about a full-blown presidential campaign can have a budget upwards of $1 billion, $1 billion or more. And Bernie Sanders is going to raise that overwhelmingly from the people. That should be encouraging. That should be encouraging, especially when we've taken such a draconian shift towards money in politics and money being speech and corporations being people. Therefore, corporations have the right to speech, which means corporations have the right to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our campaigns. You think of that Orwellian dystopic reality. I almost said future, but it's here. That's the reality. You think about that and it depresses you. You think about the reality of that clip from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez where she was role-playing and she was being the bad guy and she was demonstrating how easy it was for people to do unbelievably nefarious things in the name of corporations. You think about that and you realize that is the reality right now. And that can make you want to give up. But it's a brilliant thing when you see the power of people, the power of small donations, the power of the ability to organize in short order to mount not an opposition, not just an opposition, right? But the front runner. It's no longer the underdog, the front runner. Yeah, that's the good news. The bad news, we'll talk about after this breather. The bad news is that there's still a lot to overcome in terms of the bitterness, the internal squabbles, a lot of the things that we talked about the other day. But the reality of it is that, I mean, well, primary season is here. That's really, brace yourselves. Primary season is here. I'll be back right after this. So there's a lieutenant from the Coast Guard who was arrested. At first, it looked like it was just going to be drug and gun charges, but as you dug into the case, this guy was a homegrown terrorist, Lieutenant Christopher Hassan, who had ties to neo-Nazi organizations, who advocated for a white state. And in this arrest, if you look at the picture, you see all the weapons this guy had. I mean, not AK-47s, but AR-15s, multiple AR-15s, sniper rifles, shotguns, double-barrel shotguns, a myriad of handguns, rounds of ammunition. In addition to his ties with neo-Nazis and his cache of armaments, he had a hit list that included people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And he expressed desires to not only kill people like AOC, but also to kill Democrats in general and people. I mean, literally, it looked like he was just talking about, killing as many people as he could, particularly people of the left persuasion, specifically Democratic Socialists and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Right wing terrorism in the ranks of our military. That's not a shocker, not one bit. But on a date like today, where Donald Trump puts all the emphasis on this extremely stupid plot by Jussie Smollett to get some attention to build his career or whatever, Donald Trump attacks him but says nothing about this terrorist who, if you consider the guy was in the military, consider the scale and the scope of what this guy was planning, considering his targets included an elected congressperson, you better damn well know Donald Trump got briefed about this. He knows about this. This is not something that could fly underneath the radar of the president of the United States because of the scale and the scope and the targets. And yet Donald Trump does what Donald Trump does, which is he knows how to control the narrative, a news cycle. Because he does not want to have to answer for the fact that here exists a domestic terrorist, the right-wing persuasion. Most domestic terrorists in America are right-wing terrorists. And yet he says, oh, that's not important. Let's talk about Jussie Smollett because he called us a racist. Well, yeah, you are a racist, and your ranks are full of right-wing terrorists. Or rather, if I were to say that sentence more accurately and more precisely, is that if you're going to find terrorists, domestic terrorists in the United States, they're going to overwhelmingly be in the right-wing circles, affiliated with Nazis. That's the reality of America, and that is the real national emergency. That's the national emergency that's exacerbated by the fact that so many states allow you to get hands on weapons that can cause and inflict tremendous amount of suffering and pain and murder. So you compound the fact that people can get weapons so easily with the fact that there is an ideologically fueled hatred in this country on the right of the political spectrum. Then yes, we do have an emergency in the United States, and that is right-wing terrorism. It has been that way for some time. And so it's simultaneously not shocking, but also disgusting and infuriating. Because we become complacent. We become so familiar and so comfortable with the fact that this is our reality, that our reality includes terrorists among us. And so we become, we're numb to it. We're desensitized to the fact that the real threat is Jim. Jim, who can get access to any kind of guns that he wants and be radicalized online because, freedom of speech, right? Yeah. But what's infuriating about it is that the feds have their eyes on Black Lives Matter and Black identity extremists. If they put their resources into smoking out right-wing terrorism, they could probably get all kind of collars every single day. I know I'm mixing federal versus cops, local cops, but you get the picture. They could put a dent in terrorism in these United States if they focused on white, right-wing extremist terrorism. But instead of doing that, they focus on the targets of that terrorism. That's the frustrating part, while simultaneously being like, that's just kind of how it goes in America. That's literally how it goes. The victims are targeted. The victims are probed. The victims are infiltrated. And God forbid you organize as victims to protect yourselves. You're going to get an entire division set up in the FBI just to take you down, to infiltrate your ranks, because you had the nerve to fight back against this threat. This is historical. Come on. I know I'm speaking in general terms, generalities, but just the historical perspective. This is how it plays out time and time again. Meanwhile, angry, white, conservative, right-wing extremists are able to get their hands on all types of weapons. Like, you got to look at this picture, man. This guy was ready. This guy had enough weapons to hold off, the first round of the apocalypse. Like, he could have survived the first, with the cache of weapons he had there, he could easily survive like the first year of the apocalypse. And he had them all of it purchased, all of it ready to go to attack AOC. You know what else Trump did today? Not only did he go after Jussie Smollett, who made himself an easy target, the big idiot, both Trump and Jussie, right? But he also attacked the New York Times as being the real enemy of the people. Now, if you really think about like the things that have happened in this country, the newsrooms that have been shot up, the violence that has come as a result of the words of the president of the United States. And he uses Twitter to literally put a target on the back of anyone who works for the New York Times. And it's not just the New York Times. He does the same thing with the Washington Post. He does the same thing with any media outlet that does not worship him. That's what we're dealing with. And yet we're all accustomed to it. It is the new normal. As much as people tried early on to say, this is not normal. I'm sorry, baby girl. This actually is the new normal. It's the new normal because we've absorbed it into our psyche. We had to, in order for us to not have a nervous breakdown because of how ridiculously insane and different 2016 on were from the previous years. A lot of people make hay over the Women's March. One of the banners that was out there that said, if Hillary were president, we could be at brunch right now. A lot of people slam that slogan, and I agree with them. I particularly the perspective that they forward, speaking in terms of how that it's almost like a way of thinking that demonstrates that they would not have any political concerns if just their hero was in office. When in actuality, even Hillary Clinton, any Democrat, whoever's in office, we have a list of unanswered political concerns that require the type of action that the Women's March kicked into gear just for Donald Trump. Right? So I agree with that. But I have to say that at least we could have had a chance to get around to a brunch at least once. Right now, every single day, all day long, is nothing but relentless madness coming from the White House. Attacks on every marginalized group that you can think of. The news cycle is particularly if you work in the news cycle is so intense. You really, if you paid attention and tried to give every situation the attention that it deserves, you would probably lose your mind. Definitely lose your health. And so when they say, well, if Hillary's president, I could be at brunch right now, it does speak to a level of apathy that exists when your political party is in power, which is a breeding ground for opportunity for abuse from your political party, right? It's negligent to have that type of thinking. But at the same time, can we get a goddamn break? Can we get a single day to, think about it. Like, we're only in February of 2019. January was the longest year of my life. February, Black History Month, is not shaping up to be much better. And a lot of this, all jokes aside, a lot of this is because of Donald Trump, one, being the president of the United States, but two, understanding the ability to give the nation whiplash to distract from the last scandal, or to distract from the scandal that he doesn't want to get any attention. And this is not a critique of the media. I got plenty of critiques of the media. What the president says is news. You got to cover it. But because of that, man, it's like, because of that way of thinking, You know, we're burned out. And Donald Trump knows that. And this is how it has become the new normal, because we are tired. We've had to adjust. We've had to ignore significant stories that would have taken down another president. We're dealing with this guy who nothing seems to stick because he has no shame. He's not shameable. There's nobody in his party. There's no amount of pressure anybody could put on him for him to resign, even if he was caught red-handed. We've got a madman at the wheel, behind the wheel of this country. And his words are inflammatory. His calls for action, his tone, the tenor and the tempo of his speech and his tweets drive some of his members, some of his supporters to actions like we saw this guy, this lieutenant from the Coast Guard, preparing to kill as many people as he could, particularly Democratic Socialists, specifically Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And yet, instead of addressing that because of the political baggage, Donald Trump attacks Jussie Smollett's stupid behind. And then he attacks the New York Times so that he doesn't have to say anything about one of his supporters that wanted to kill a sitting congresswoman.
But being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
54 years ago today, February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, was gunned down. And every year I do take a moment to pause and reflect on Brother Malcolm because of the influence that he has had on my life and so many people, right? But just it was, I would have loved to see what Malcolm was becoming, what he would have become, what he was turning into, because he grew, and he grew from being a radical who wanted nothing to do with anyone else, any other race, anybody else. He just wanted to focus on black nationalism, and he specifically wanted nothing to do with white people. But his spiritual journey to Mecca opened his eyes to all of humanity and to the beauty of humanity in general. And at the end of his life, he challenged everything that he had become as being one of the lead ministers of the Nation of Islam. He challenged it directly and challenged the Nation of Islam, which subsequently led to his assassination. But he did so boldly, and he did so with so much conviction and being willing to lay his entire life on the line. I played that clip because that clip was from the early years of Malcolm. And while he changed, he still spoke the truth even in the earlier years, right? Before he went to Mecca, before he left the Nation of Islam, he still was speaking the truth. It was just sometimes the truth has layers. I mean, to be quite honest with you, The truth has layers. And so I would have loved to see what Malcolm was going to become. I would have loved to witness the culmination of that growth, but we didn't get a chance to see that because he was stolen from us, like so many other leaders during that time. And, for me, Malcolm, and I would love to hear from you in the comment section. I actually had a family member. I had a family member who didn't understand my, I wouldn't call it an obsession, but my fixation on Malcolm. And they just asked me, like, do you really believe the stuff that he says? And, because what he, particularly the early years of Malcolm, when he was minister of the Nation of Islam, he spoke oftentimes intentionally inflammatory. Right? Malcolm knew how to use the media. He knew how to say what needed to be said to get the attention of the media, to drive the narrative that he wanted to drive. And so a family member who pulled me aside and said, do you really support like everything that he said? And I'm like, for the most part, yeah. I mean, there's very few things that I've read or listened to by Malcolm that I'm like, I just disagree with. I honestly, right now, I can't think of it. I'm sure if you send me a clip of him saying something that, maybe, but no, I mean, it was a level of confidence. It was his level of intensity. It was the level of clarity with which he spoke and the confidence with which he spoke. And then the way he conveyed it with in a manner that made you want to be better. I mean, he's Muslim. I was Christian. I know Dr. King was Christian, but man, if I ever identify with anybody more, it's Malcolm. I know. I quite literally know the religion of part of it has absolutely no bearing on anything meaningful, but there's somewhat of an expectation that people are lump you into categories. Oh man, you grew up in the Baptist church and you're religious, and so it would seem like you would lean more towards a Martin Luther King. And yeah, I dig Martin and all those things, but in terms of influence in my life, it was Malcolm, hands down. And you've heard old episodes. You can go back to the same episode a year ago. I think that I did the entire episode on Malcolm. But I just had to pause and reflect on a man who, at such a young age, understood his place in society, the risk that he was taking, and did not care about the threat to his life because he knew what he had to say at that moment was worth dying for. El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Brother Malcolm, assassinated on this day 54 years ago, February 21st, 1965.
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.